Good morning, everyone. We'll wait just a couple of more seconds to let everybody enter into the session.
There's Bert. There's Herb.
Hi, Bert.
Hi.
We did it.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third session of Conversational Church, where we're talking about building again stronger than ever and all of the elements that go into making that happen. This is our third consecutive Sunday of having these conversations. If you have been with us for the first two, you will remember that we started off by covering a review of our strategic plan. We then talked a little bit about some of the planning that's going on around our two campuses, actually our three campuses, including the online. We also talked about some staffing changes that we're excited about. And Dirk shared with us sort of the high-level planning for reopening in-person worship in June, the middle part of June. That was our first session. Our second session focused on several of our ministries. Not everything that's going on, but we thought you would be particularly interested in hearing more about our youth ministry, our children's ministry, and the new changes that are happening there with our new staff that's coming in. We also talked about plans for programs upcoming in the deepening faith area, as well as a really, really exciting overview of the Changemaker initiative. So that was our first 2 weeks. We're having our third week, and this week we thought we would focus on some of the exciting new programs that have kicked off, and several of them kicked off during our pandemic, which seems a little improbable, but we will not be deterred. So a little bit of logistics here. If everybody should be on mute, and so in this opening 30-minute session, everybody will stay on mute to allow the presenters to present without interruption. When we finish our prepared presentations, everyone will be put into a smaller breakout room. And in each breakout room, there will be a facilitator who will handle questions and answers. And that is your opportunity to unmute yourself and make your voice heard. And we're hoping that you will do exactly that. We will stay in breakout for about 30 minutes. And then there'll be about a minute notice that you'll see on your screen that we're going to finish breakout. And at the end of that 60-second notice, we will all come back together for a final 15-minute wrap-up. During the final 15-minute wrap-up, any questions that have emerged during the breakout sessions that maybe weren't fully covered during our prepared presentation session, we will try to address those for you. The agenda for today is going to start out with an overview from Pastor Sam of her ministry, Front Porch. We will then hear from Carol and Katie about the Art Changes Us initiative. Pastor Jeremy will then talk with us about his new Zoe app, and then we will finish the prepared presentations by going through a summary of where we are financially. And I'm sure everybody will be very interested how we're planning to pay for all the things that we're excited about doing. So with that, I will introduce Pastor Sam to take us through a a review of her front porch ministry. And I forgot to mention that it will probably be a better, presentation for you if in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, where you see the little word view, if you will put yourself into speaker view. That way you will have a full screen of the presenter. So with that, Pastor Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Ken. It's a real joy to be together this morning. God, may you be in this time and fill us with excitement for the future of your church. Amen. So front porch, which many of you know, and Aaron, you can go to that first slide. It is our new exciting experience in the downtown Mountain View neighborhood. And whereas at Los Altos United Methodist Church on our Magdalena campus, we will often talk about discipleship and really dig into that. Front porch, we very much care about discipleship, and we call it neighboring, right? We say we are engaging in the sacred act of neighboring, and it will sound very familiar in that it is all about connection, compassion, and courage. This morning, we have coffee on us, which I will explain in a moment. But because of a very real possibility of rain, it felt like nobody was going to want to hang out at a park while it maybe or maybe didn't drizzle, but was kind of dreary and cold. And so on the sign that I leave up on Sunday mornings, I said, still grab a coffee on us, but we won't meet in person. So find a way to establish new connections, to reach out with a radical compassion, and to take courage in taking meaningful risks. Because we believe that is the sacred act of neighboring, right? We believe those things make up spaces where we can have flourishing neighborhoods. In fact, Pastor Kathy and I were just talking this past week, and one of the things we said was, we don't want front porch to be a space where, you know, people are becoming a little bit better, and we've really done a good job. The goal of front porch and what we genuinely believe is that God is already moving to transform our neighborhoods. And front porch is really about harnessing the way that God is moving, being a part of that, and really helping to transform our neighborhoods into places where everyone can flourish. And so that's what we do at Front Porch. Pre-pandemic, we were just this close to that kind of tipping point where you're really in the new space. In fact, 2 weeks before we got our shelter in place order, I got this email from a young guy who he's now moved to Boston, but he said, Sam, I was so glad to get to be there. It felt like witnessing the future of the church. You know, it was really, you could feel the energy. We gather for dinner. It is intentionally a space where people from the lowest economy to the highest economy and everywhere in between sit down, share a meal, and talk about what it is to share in this life and to do those things that we've said we care about, that we think create disciples, right? Create good, meaningful neighborhoods, which are connection, compassion, and courage. And so that was really great. And then we got into the pandemic, and it turns out that a global pandemic is not particularly conducive for a dinner gathering, right? And so we've had to kind of figure out what we're doing in the meantime. And so we've come up with some kind of gap fillers, but we are really excited that we are about to start moving into kind of the third phase, which is this post-pandemic or almost post-pandemic phase, where we're really anticipating that we'll start very small with small meals. You know, I'll have a few people over a few different nights, and we'll start to kind of rebuild. There's already energy, but we will rebuild in a new way that energy. So Aaron, if you'll go to the next slide. I mean, in the meantime, we have been kind of holding events where we decorated Easter eggs that went out to Project We Hope, right? It's really, how can we help people engage in the sacred act of neighboring, right? And so we had an event, people came over to the driveway, kept their masks on. We even had an ambulance show up to help out. and kind of do this engaging in the sacred act of neighboring through decorating eggs. What we find is particularly kind of millennials, they want to volunteer, but they don't want to fill out a registration form. So if there are opportunities to just show up and do something good, that is where we are finding a great place for people to set that initial connection. And Erin, you can go to the next slide. We've also been doing this thing we call Coffee on Us. And that is, we prepay for coffee at Red Rock on Sunday mornings. People grab a cup of coffee and come meet us at the park. This is really a way of beginning to establish those sustained connections that we think are really going to transform our neighborhood and our neighborhoods. One Sunday we held a food drive at where people dropped off food at Red Rock and got a cup of coffee. I know it seems odd to have a picture of a bottle of wine in a wagon, but that is from dropping off notes at my neighbors' houses and saying like, hey, I'm excited about getting out of this pandemic and getting to share a meal and a drink together and just kind of build our neighborhood up. And James dropped off a bottle of wine. I don't know, I've never met James. He said, me too, can't wait. And so it's just those things that it's very clear that people are hungry for this. Are these people going to come to traditional worship at Los Altos United Methodist Church on the Magdalena campus? Probably not, right? Which is why we have this space so that we can celebrate the traditional worship at the Magdalena campus, and we can have this thing for people for whom that may never feel comfortable, but there is an alternative space for them to grow and to be transformed while they transform their neighborhood. And that's what I've got.
Thank you, Sam. That was great. We're all rooting for you, and what we see happening is extremely encouraging, and we can't wait for this pandemic to be over so that you can fully engage again. Our next presentation is one of our newest programs, Art Changes Us, actually kicked off during the pandemic, which is a miracle in and of itself. And here to talk with us about it are Carol DeMonte and Katie Pavachel. So I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Ken, and thanks for inviting us to share today. You've heard it said, love your neighbor, but what does that look like really? How do we meet and engage with people who are different from us in language, culture, and life, even though they may live right here as our actual neighbors? It's exactly the kind of thing Sam was saying. I had a vision as a Changemaker Fellow. What if we could use the visual arts as a ministry platform to reach youth from underrepresented parts of our nearby community? How might the visual arts become a common language for authentic engagement across the cultural chasm we see here in the heart of Silicon Valley and make us better neighbors? Art Changes Us emerged from our collective imaginations, a neighboring ministry that has not only reached into the lives of dozens of local youth, but also into the lives of their friends, families, and teachers, and formed really, really powerful connections. And while grounded in faith and the Gospels, Art Changes Us is secular in focus and open to all. Next slide, if you wouldn't mind.
So this is what it looks like. All of our sessions have been conducted online via Zoom, and we've made it work. Next slide, please. And this is what it looks like. Here are some of the images our artists have made that are featured on our online gallery and store at the artchangesus.org website. Check it out and see some more great work by our artists. Next slide, please, Erin. And this is what it looks like. At the end of every quarter, we gather in person, socially distanced, of course, at Ringsdorf Park to celebrate and acknowledge our students' achievements.
The mission of Art Changes Us is youth discovering people through art. But we've also discovered what neighboring can look like in the real world, even in the midst of social distancing, Zoom everything, and stay-at-home orders. This Wednesday marks our first year anniversary of teaching. And today we celebrate at Rangsdorf Park our first year with our students. Right after this, we take off to the park.
We have cake.
In that year, we have grown many times into a large extended community of true neighbors. Now, like many startups, we have reached an inflection point. This is where things can really take off, but the organization needs an expanded game plan to make this happen. Now's the time to put our second part of our model to work: social entrepreneurship and revenue generation with our audience, our artists. So what's in our new playbook for the future? Next slide, please.
No, actually stay on this one. So our first play is to engage the local business community in creative projects. So we have a group of talented artists that want to work on real world projects for people in our community and earn money to fuel their futures as well as our programs. So maybe you need some website photos or a poster or a banner or event photos. Headshots for your team, a creative intern, call us. We can find a great talented artist and create something great for you. So the second play in our new playbook is to get into the real world. We're preparing to move physically into the Art Changes Us studio at the LAUMC Mountain View campus. It's an upstairs space that was made ready for us last year as part of the major upgrade of the Trinity. And it was never occupied by us due to the pandemic. So we'll be outfitting that studio with technology, hardware and software for designing and creating digital, print, and multimedia works. So come see us. We'll be upstairs in Mountain View, holding live teaching sessions for our artists, events for our clients and supporters, as well as exhibitions of our students' work. So watch for invitations. And our third new play is to expand our team. We've been a small team of 4 people with a very supportive board, but now we really need a bigger team. So if your passion is youth development, the arts and technology, or nonprofit administration, please contact us. Next slide, please.
So that's a look at the future with Art Changes Us, a neighboring initiative focused on local youth beyond our usual reach. Thanks to everyone who has supported this transformative ministry with prayers, advice, resources, time, talent, and financial donations. This is what connection, compassion, and courage looks like. And our artists, these youth, our neighbors, are especially grateful. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Katie. It's an amazing program. It holds so much potential for the youth that are involved. And frankly, the art that they're creating is pretty remarkable. So hats off to you guys. It's great.
Got to plug artchangesus.org. Check it out.
There we go. That's right. All right. Our third presentation this morning is from Pastor Jeremy, who's going to talk to us about his new app, Zoe, and the promise that it holds for the future. So, Jeremy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Ken. I am very excited to share with you about our Zoe Spiritual Practice app. You can go to that slide there, Aaron. Our Zoe Spiritual Practice app is available on the App Store. And we are actually right now testing a Google version, an Android version. The Zoe Spiritual Practice app, I just want to kind of let you in on the big idea of what it is before I throw some details your way. So the word Zoe is really the key to understanding it. It's in Greek, in the language of the New Testament. There's 2 words that are translated into English as life. One of them is bios, which just means like we're alive, we're not dead. Then there's another word, a word um, that describes the life we all long to live, a life of connection, a life with less stress, a life that is full. And that word is Zoe. And it's interesting because that's what science tells us is the result of regular spiritual practice. When you regularly engage in spiritual practice, you have a more connected, less stress, more full life. Your life is more like the life that you want. And that's a good thing. And so our app is focused on helping people do that. Uh, the reality, though, is, Sam was just mentioning this. There's a large number of people that are not engaged in church, right? If church is the only vehicle for spiritual practices, we have a problem because there's a huge number of people who won't come to church. But a large number of those people who won't come to church are actually very spiritually interested. They're spiritually engaged, and interestingly enough, over half of those people used to attend church regularly. So the Zoe app is built with those people in mind, particularly with millennials and Gen Z in mind, because we know that when millennials and Gen Z have a problem, their very first thing that they do is try to solve that with technology. If they want to get more fit, they download a fitness app. They want a new recipe for pot pie, they Google it. And so the technology and messaging of this is targeted towards young adults. But as we have lived into this, we have found out that it's working for those young adults for sure. It's also working for a large number of other people who won't, or in some cases just can't come to church. Not because of a pandemic, but other life issues that are causing them not to be able to come to church. And Zoe is allowing them to engage in spiritual practices wherever they are at any time of the day without ever having to come onto a church campus, which many of them are not really comfortable with doing. So we're in the very beginning of this. In November, we got funding from this innovative, exciting church that we're all part of. And we released our beta app. You can go to the next slide there. We released our beta app early this year, just a couple of months ago. And just over the last couple of months, we have produced and released 75 original spiritual practice videos in the idea of nature, social action, art, meditation, prayer, and study. These spiritual practice videos are simple and helping people hear and experience the presence of God in all of those different ways. In that, our initial target was 200 users, and we have already surpassed that target. And we are seeing in the world of the app world an above average user rate right now. And what's maybe even more exciting than all of that is that because of some really new development techniques, app development techniques, we actually are looking at being able to release a much more fully featured product in the very near future. That has a lot of things like favoriting and ratings and being able to sort. It's going to be a really great app. So this is just the beginning. Our hope is that Zoe is a way that people are able to connect with God all over the country, for sure, all over the world. That's already a reality, but that it will lead us not just into watching videos, but also into connecting with others, right? That it will lead into spiritual connections. And we've got a lot of exciting plans and features that are headed in that direction in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremy. We're really looking forward to seeing how this plays out. Being able to reach individuals through Sam's ministry, through Jeremy's ministry, that would not normally show up, as Jeremy said, and Sam said, at the Magdalena campus. That's part of our outreach. That is part of our neighboring activity. And we're just thrilled to be able to have so many different ways of trying to live into that. Now, how do we pay for all this? You might be wondering. So here to talk a little bit about sort of the budget and the finance implications and some of our planning that will be forthcoming as we enter into our next fiscal year, July 1st, is Denise Robinson, our and also Alan Siren. Alan is chair of finance, and Denise runs everything else at the church. So Denise and Alan, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thank you, Ken. Yeah, I'm Denise Robinson. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of the church, and I'm going to give the presentation, but Alan is going to be providing some commentary as needed. So Aaron, go ahead and go to the next slide. So you've heard from finance committee meetings, church council meetings, the letter that came out from Kathy, that we are expecting to end this fiscal year 21, with a budget deficit, pretty significant budget deficit. And I wanted to sort of just highlight what some of those key drivers are. So we've had significant loss of revenue from the Children's Center preschool, and that's both from a shutdown and also just from class size restrictions. Normally, our preschool in a non-pandemic time would have like 22 to 24 students per class. Right now, the restrictions limit that those class sizes to 14. And in the first semester, they were only limited to 10. So that's pretty significant revenue impact. You've heard and seen that our general contributions are down year over year about 14%. We've also lost facility use income on both campuses, which is significant. And then on the expense side, we've taken the opportunity to actually make some investments in technology to help us weather COVID. Some of that's been new streaming equipment. Some of it's been laptop computers for our staff to be able to work remotely, et cetera. So, without getting into the actual numbers and where we're going to end up, I'm sort of just addressing this at a high level, but that sort of explains what are the key drivers of the budget deficit that we're going to experience this year. Next slide, Erin. So you've also heard that we have some pretty aspirational goals in the strategic plan. And coming off of a year of a budget deficit, how in the world are we going to plan to pay for those? And one of the things is, we recognize that we have to find alternative funding and revenue models. And you heard a little bit about them from Sam for Front Porch, and Katie and Carol for Art Changes Us, and Jeremy for Zoe. And those represent opportunities for us. We know that we can't continue just to solely rely on increased congregational giving. We can't just continue to ask you to give more every year. And so some of the alternative sources that we're looking at and actually implementing include subscription revenue, sales revenue, rental revenue, external grants, sponsorships from outside organizations. And all of these, we're actually implementing as we speak. And the other thing I would say about this is we're not the first church to think in these terms, that we might need to, find alternate sources of funding. Those of us in the kitchen cabinet, which is a sort of a group that supports Kathy, we've read a book called The Coming Revolution in Church Economics, and it's written by Mark Demas, and it is actual experience within churches who have sought these alternate funding sources. And so we're using that as sort of a little bit of a guide to help us think about maybe how we can do this. Next slide. So specifically, when you look at the programs, so for Front Porch, in FY22, we expect to receive somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 of funding from the conference. The conference has been supporting that ministry, and each year that level of funding decreases. So we have to have a plan going forward. Going forward, you could hear Sam talk about dinner church. Right now, she's doing dinner church, that ministry is doing dinner church on a small level, but she really envisioned growing that to be sizable, and sizable at Mountain View, sizable maybe in other geographic locations. The other thing about Front Porch is it's attracting new participants, right? So it's not, it's an expansion of our donor pool that can contribute to support that program. Art changes us. You heard from Katie and Carol. The business model anticipates outside funding from sales and commissions of art, in addition to donations. And some of those donations come, again, from outside organizations. For Zoe, right now, Zoe, the online community has been supported with seed funding from the Opportunity Fund. We expect probably a little bit more to be invested in that. But the idea is that eventually it will become a subscription revenue model after the beta. And so we're very optimistic about that. We've seen Changemaker. You've all heard of the $1 million Lilly grant that we received, which is going to fund the seed funding for that for the next 5 years. But even in that budget, there in years 4 and 5, there are event and participation fees from other churches, from other organizations, from participation in symposiums. And so again, alternate funding of sources. And then in our first Sunday discussion, you heard some high-level discussion of the work that's going on in the campus master plan team. And right now we have a bequeath that was donated to the church and has been designated to fund at least the initial campus capital investments. And those investments could be made both on the Los Altos campus and the Mountain View campus. And then at some time in the future, we do anticipate needing to do a capital campaign. So those are sort of the funding sources we're looking at. So we're coming up on the beginning of the next fiscal year. And so you ask, what are our financial priorities and how are we really going to manage the budget? So the first financial priority that we have is to rebuild our operating reserves for both the church and the preschool. We have been very fortunate to have benefited from the PPP loan. That was in the amount of just slightly under $500,000, and that's helped us maintain healthy reserves through this pandemic. We do anticipate that loan will be forgiven 100%, and that loan will then become income in FY22. The other thing that is important is we would like to return to a break-even operating budget. If you'll recall, our operating budget for FY21 was at a deficit, not as big as a deficit as we're projecting to end the year, but we think it's important to get back to a break-even operating budget. And we're going to do that by really focusing on strategic priorities and being willing and prepared to have to make some tough decisions if we have to. We might have to make some decisions to, cancel programs or postpone programs that are maybe not the highest priority in our strategic plan. We might have to make some tough decisions on personnel or some other expenses. Again, we're taking a very, very strategic and close look at that. As you all know, personnel makes up the biggest part of our budget. And so we are only projecting a 2% increase in our personnel budget for the year. I've actually done the personnel budget, and that includes all of the employer taxes and everything. And the thing I'd say about that is you've heard us announce a couple of new hires, especially in our children's and youth ministries, that really represent a step up in in our personnel capability. And so to be able to increase those, that, bringing that experience and those capabilities to some of our programs with only a 2% increase in the personnel budget is really, that's a win. The other thing we've done is we've taken advantage of some staff reductions through attrition. And some of those have been, pretty highly paid staff members. So that's also helped. And the other thing, which I sort of mentioned earlier, is we've made some technology investments in 21, which will allow for some lower expenses in FY22. So to meet these priorities, what are we asking of you all? What are we asking of the congregation? We are going to ask you to consider increasing your giving. We're going to ask you to consider increasing it by 10%. And how do I come up with that 10%? So 8% of that is really to help us close part of the contribution gap that we have this year. You heard me say our contributions are down 14%. We're not going to ask the congregation to step up to the point where we close that gap. We're looking at, again, these alternative sources to do that. And then also to help us in that 10% is to help us cover the 2% increase in the personnel cost. So I hope this sort of high level discussion of the budget and funding is helpful to you as we think about and approach this next fiscal year.
Denise, thank you for that. We'll have an opportunity in breakout to hear your questions and try to provide a little bit more detail if needed. The one thing I would say is this congregation has always been an extremely generous congregation. We've had challenges in the past. We've had financial challenges in the past, and we always find a way to work through those together. And I am confident that we will once again show how generous we are, and we will find a way through this. So there'll be more coming out shortly. Next Sunday is our Commitment Sunday. And Pastor Kathy talked about that in service today. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone's ability to step up and help for next year, and ensure that all of the wonderful programs that you're hearing about are able to thrive. Pastor Kathy, did you have anything you wanted to say before we go into breakout?
No, just that I am eager to hear your thoughts, everyone. And so just know that the facilitators of your breakout rooms are collecting your feedback, and it is all coming back, and we're hearing you. So I hope you'll use this opportunity for discussion as a chance not only to ask questions, but to let us know what your thoughts are. That's what this is designed for.
Exactly. Great. So now that wraps up our prepared presentation for today. Aaron is going to put us all into breakout rooms. We'll be there for approximately 30 minutes. And then as I mentioned earlier, we will come back and do a short wrap up before we conclude. So Aaron, let's go ahead and go to breakout.
Okay, so the people I see right now, looks like I see Susan, Raymond, Holly. I don't know if it's because you haven't accepted a breakout room or because Zoom is insisting that.
I lost power. I just got back in.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, so Zoom is not showing you as unassigned, so we can't actually move you into a breakout room now. This has happened every session. We've had a few people who don't end up in their breakout rooms. So if everyone who is in the local meeting, so that's Raymond, Sam, somebody who's an iPhone that says it's connecting to a audio, Holly and Susan, this is now our breakout room because Zoom is being interesting. So if everybody unmutes and potentially turns your camera on, then we can have a conversation. Awesome. So, and if nobody else is unmuted, then
just me and Yvonne are going to talk. Oh, Raymond.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just gonna, but you should know, I have a dominating presence here in this room, so I'm just going to talk about front porch the whole time.
You know, that would work for me perfectly. So the questions which were put in the chat are: what is unclear, if anything's unclear? What's exciting to you? What worries you? Where do you see yourself in this vision? And how do you want to partner? So what worked last time for those of us who weren't in a particular breakout room was to just like have a really a conversation just about those questions in whatever order. You know, let's talk about what's interesting to you, what you're questioning, what you're thinking about. And then I will pass the information back to Kathy. And the other interesting nuance of this is everyone who is in a breakout room is going to get a warning ahead of time, and their breakout rooms will close out. So we are not going to get a warning. It's just in like 25 minutes, people are going to start appearing. So we will know that the breakout room is over when everybody else appears. So
sounds like Harry Potter to me, Yvonne.
Exactly. You know, this is the fun, let's just go with whatever happens room. So.
Huh. Yeah, I'm not good at that.
I would say that's me. Just roll with it.
Yeah, you know.
I am known in my household as the queen of flexibility.
I am certainly not known as that. So it's ironic that, you know, this is the
flexible room.
Exactly. Yes.
Mary Ella Stewart had a book called To Bend Without Breaking.
Exactly.
By the way, Sam, nice product placement.
Thank you. Thank you.
I saw the little, look at that.
Oh yeah.
Facing the right direction there. Yeah. Pause, slow. Yeah.
And it's being recorded so we can play it over and over and over again.
Exactly. You can just, you know, you can just have a TikTok about that, right?
That's right. Put on Boomerang.
Yeah, that's right. So Sam, I don't know, what is it you want to partner with us on in this work?
You know, it's really interesting because I feel like it is hard to remember that front porch victories are LAU.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I see now it says host.
It's host. Somebody's coming.
Yeah, sorry guys, this is Erin. We were having some technical difficulties and I can't get Raymond into the room to host. Does someone else want to ask the questions?
Sure. I'll be glad to facilitate. I'm good at asking questions. I may not have many answers, but so is anything unclear? So the questions are, what's unclear? What sounds exciting to you? What worries you? Where do you see yourself in this vision? And how do I want to be a part? How do I want to be a partner in this work? So that's a lot of questions.
Not a lot of chatter here.
Katie, can I jump ahead to what's exciting?
Yes,
What's
please.
exciting to me is all of these fresh new ideas to reach out to folks who may not come to our campus. So I think
It is not as often like directly beneficial, but I know that it is so good and it is so much a part of being one church. And so I think this is the same kind of thing. It's just a different way of seeing it than we're used to. So yeah, like I want anybody who has questions or who is confused or concerned, I want to have those conversations, right? And like, so this is being recorded. I don't know if I should. I used a word in a sermon that I didn't even think of it as like a word you shouldn't use. And like when somebody emailed me, I was like, oh, didn't occur to me. Thank you for letting me know, right? I always want those conversations to be able to happen because I think that's the only way we kind of reach better understanding and growth.
I think the comparison to youth ministries or to the women's retreat or any of a number of things that, you know, I'm not invited to, and that doesn't mean that they don't lack, that they lack value. Yeah, you know, they're doing something important. The entire church benefits. It's just not something that I'm going to drop in on. You know, and that's a difference from if we had had a regular worship service going on at the former Trinity campus. You know, there were people from Los Altos that go, oh, I should drop in and be supportive, you know, and they'd show up for a worship service there. That's not really the model for Front Porch.
Right.
But it's still valuable because I'm not going to drop in on the women's retreat either.
Yeah. Right.
Well, and this gets really interesting to me. Like when we think about like it was already interesting when I first joined LAUMC because it was a much bigger church than the church I came from. And it's hard sometimes to find your place of community and belongingness when it's a, you know, even now, even not now, but before the pandemic, I could sometimes go to church and people would be like, oh, are you new here?
Yeah.
No, I have just never
here 20
sat
years.
in your area, right? I have never sat in the back right. I always sit in the front left. And so you never saw me.
Yeah.
And now when we are like multiple campuses and multiple different visions, you know, it's really interesting. I was talking to Sateri and talking about like, in what ways and how does it make sense to feel more connected to the Trinity Fellowship? And, you know, we were talking about maybe it's not necessarily, and it could be for some people going to their worship service sometimes, but maybe it's like figuring out social events or like, how do we figure out the ways we feel connected across all of the different groups of, you know, usness. Yeah.
And really, I think about it as same vision contextualized, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. In a way that I find very exciting, right? There is a limit to the number of people who are going to be into something such as Front Porch. There is a limit to the number of, I mean, even if everything is going exactly as it should, right? There are some people who it's just not really going to be their thing. And so this allows us to not only say like, we're okay with that, but like when somebody, so I've had people show up at Coffee on Us and say like, hey, what about your worship services? Like, do you guys not do worship services? And I say like, this does not do what you might consider a formal worship service, but here's the log, here's the time and information for LAUMC online. And they'd be like, oh, great, I can't wait to log on, right? So it allows us another avenue for people to be visible, even for other things.
Yeah, and we've already had some practice at doing that, if you think about it, with Creekside Crossings, because there are people that would come to Creekside Crossings that don't come to any morning service. That is their primary community.
Yeah.
That's who they know. That's what they do. And so when we have some big special thing, we say, oh, we're going to have just one morning service and everybody's going to come, and then we're going to have Creekside. It's so this is just the same, only now it's not on that campus.
Exactly. And I will say, like, I think for me the hardest part is not being in worship at the Magdalena campus every Sunday, and it is the stretch that I need, right? It is traditional worship is very comfortable for me. It is very like, it is really where I find my bread and butter, right? And there are people who literally have never heard the good news, like who don't know they are loved, who don't know that there is a God. I come across people all the time who think that because they're gay, they can't be a part of church. Right. And like in Silicon Valley, I'm like, how is that possible? But it's because the dominant message is that they're not. And so it gives me the opportunity to be in spaces to really share that. Yeah.
This is interesting to think about because like just yesterday we did a habitat build at LAUMC, and since it wasn't part of Compassion Week, it was kind of a different thing. I just would ask people as they came, like, who were they from and were they affiliated with? And there was this one couple that just somehow found us through an internet search and came and had no connection with any church. And I suspect that there are a set of people in the community that service opportunities are that thing that will like be the first connection for them as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And for some, it will be the only connection.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, if I look at my husband, that's the only way he gets connected with LAUMC. He comes to the service opportunities regularly. He's even gone on, several of our week-long service mission trips. And that's the thing that is meaningful to him. And he finds, connection in.
Yeah. And I think, kind of what's next and what's coming up is that as we look at the church, Big C as a whole, right? Not like LAUMC, not the Methodist church, but churches all over. What we are finding is that fewer people are going, right? And so what we have the opportunity to do is to have more people coming, although we may have fewer people in the same place at the same time. We have a lot of different opportunities between a Magdalena campus, a Mountain View campus, an online campus. And I think, the Changemaker Initiative allows us to really, like, the sky's the limit, right? We're going to continue to find new ways of really being a part of connection, compassion, and courage in a way that all people can flourish. It's so funny, when we started talking about those three words, I was like, oh, those feel right. And now it feels so much like everything I do, I'm not like trying to do connection, compassion, and courage, but those are the things that make up the stuff I do. in a way that feels really good. It feels like, you know, like maybe the Holy Spirit is moving, which I know we don't
Just
really talk
maybe,
about,
you know.
but
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, I think, you know, thinking about how some people have just like this one narrow connection to the community makes me think about the challenge that we're going to face with the online campus. You know, it's pretty easy for me, at least, to drop in on the Zoom, drop in on LAUMC Live, feel connected, because I've been going for years and I know y'all, and I've been in the room, and I've been in the quad, I've been, you know, and so it's easy to pull on the memory and say, oh, I remember this, I have this sustained connection. But for people who begin to participate in the online campus, who have never and may never ever come to a physical campus, how do we ensure that they are getting that meaningful connection to community and not just sitting back and consuming and not quite getting what it is that they actually need? You know what I mean? How do we do that?
oh yeah,
So I think that's really interesting for me to observe the connections that my daughter Rally makes with people around the country and around the world who she may or may never actually see face to face, right? And she is certainly, in my experience, was someone who earlier started to make deep connections with folks that she may never meet in person. It's super interesting because she is very introverted, and you know, it's just interesting to observe those things and feel like there may be a set of people for whom those kind of connections that I really feel a different connection when I've met somebody in person, even just once, right? Even if it's like, like I remember a group of people, software engineers I was working with in India, and I met them in person after working with them for 1.5 years, right? And it just then was much richer, even all of the times that we were on the phone or on video calls. For me, it's interesting to think about, like, maybe for the generation, Sam, that you're part of, and kids that are younger, like your kiddos generation, how is that shifting?
yeah.
Yeah.
Although I'll say with my kids, I continue to see that, like, they connect all the time electronically. And I sound like an old person, I know, but like it in ways that like concern me, because there are things that like are not real, right? Like I mean, and I had to really change my tune a little over 1 year ago, because I used to say all the time, like, the internet is not real. And now I'm like, you know, last year I've been like, the internet's real, let's connect. Real internet's real, right? And so I think where Front Porch is that like a hybrid is necessary, right? I think even for the online campus, you know, it may not be that people interact in person with anybody else on the online campus, but we do hope that they are interacting with people in their physical world, right? You know, Front Porch, I don't need everybody to come to a Front Porch thing, but I do want you to go next door and say hello and see how you can be a part of the person living around you's life. Yeah, in a way that like feels really exciting and very much the work that God is about, right? God was never like, here's the thing, I need you all to go to this one place at the same time, and sit down and face the front, and stand up and sit down, sing, sit, listen, and say some things, right? And I say that as a person who, like, again, worship, I love it. I find it incredibly valuable.
Mhm.
And I think like to be able to be in a space where we say like different things speak to different people differently, and we're gonna live into that is really exciting. And I think the biggest challenge in that is that it is hard to all be on the same page, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna work really hard at it, and I think we're gonna be okay. But I think that'll be one of the biggest challenges, right? Is with so much stuff going on, how do we make sure we're all facing the same direction?
Hey, Sam, I opened up the other room, so people will be coming in a few seconds.
Appreciate the head. Look at that heads up.
I know this was fabulous because last time it was a little bit of a surprise. I really love this because like I realized that as we talked about this, like it totally shifted my thinking. Like I was in this standard, like, oh, if we're thinking about like online, well, it's still the people who are part of that online space as opposed to all of their neighbors. And it's really about like breaking down all those walls and being in the community. I love what you shared. Thanks, Sam.
It
Now
was
we all
totally
back on the-
inspiring, everyone, but I couldn't possibly repeat it.
Please, please
But it was
include some support to the senior community that is partly tech savvy, but not totally. So be sure that part of the future includes some help for the seniors that might have families on vacation or someone that can't help us.
All right, everyone. So we're back from breakout, and we've lost a few people, but not too many. So we will start our final wrap-up session for today's Zoom. And let's see if we have any follow-up questions that we need to address.
So we do, Ken. So I'll ask this. So first one is for Jeremy. How will the Zoe subscription work? Will people have to pay from the first time they look at the app?
No, thank you. That's a really great question. There are adjacent apps. There's a kind of family of apps that just focus on meditation that have sort of shown a kind of well-proven business model for what is known as freemium, where there is a large body of content that is free. And then for a subscription, you can engage at a higher level. There's extra special content that is available. There are other features that a casual user just kind of logging on to watch a video here and there wouldn't care for, but somebody who's really digging into the app would be willing to pay for. And so, in those organizations, once you are at a larger scale of users, a very small percentage of your users paying for that premium subscriptions can ultimately end up funding ongoing work in that.
Great.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks. Sam, these a couple for you. First, how many people are currently being served by Front Porch? And secondly, as you look forward post-pandemic, what do you imagine Front Porch activities will look like?
so currently, we are gonna see around 20 folks on a Sunday coffee on us, and that is not always the same people. There's a core, right? But I would say kind of total who are engaging in Front Porch, we have about 40 folks, including some folks we're just now getting to know, which is the most exciting. No offense to Phil, who I think is still on this call. I enjoy getting to know you, but I already know you. You're great. Right. So we're getting to know new people, which is really exciting. Neighbors who just happened to see us, and so they wanted to stop by and find out what was going on. And then what we see this kind of looking like as the pandemic ends is we will go back to a dinner model, although we do anticipate it'll have to look different to begin with, right? It'll begin small. It'll probably go back to the driveway before it moves back to the Mountain View campus as a way of keeping it outside for a while. And then we really anticipate that. So before we really said like community dinner, come meet people, it'll be great. And I continue to think that is beautiful and wonderful. And we anticipate that, we have really moved into like, this is a neighbor and this is what neighbors do. And that is who we are. We are people who engage in the sacred act of neighboring so that we can transform our neighborhoods. And so I really anticipate those Sunday evenings or Thursday evenings, whenever those gatherings happen, they will very much be about, here is all the amazing neighboring, all the amazing sacred act of neighboring stuff that has happened. We want to celebrate that. We want to lift that up. We want to remind you why that matters, equip you to do more of it, and send you out into your neighborhoods to do more of it and to like keep that growing and going.
Thanks. Thanks, Sam. This one's for Carol and Katie. These couple questions about Art Changes Us. First, are you going to do anything besides photography as an art form? And secondly, how much revenue do you count on or anticipate from the sales of art?
I'll take the first part of that, Katie. You can take the second part, okay? As to, are we going to move past photography? Yes, and we already have. We started our first cohort last spring, a year ago, with basic photography. It's all done on cell phones right now because that's what's accessible. And then added in advanced photography. And then we branched out into mixed media, which includes collage and watercolor and altered books, found objects, those things. And then we added in our last session, graphic design. And so we are absolutely expanding. It's amazing what we have figured out, how we can do things on a Zoom call. I mean, it's really amazing. And we have a few commissions, and any of you Rotarians and people that live around know the Bear Project that's coming up. It's a big, big project with Rotarians. And we have been commissioned to do one of those for the community, which is a really exciting thing. And that's our first really big commission. So it's cool. So we've expanded past photography. Photography will be at the root, I think, always for our beginning students, because it also gives the opportunity to learn all the things you would need in any other art form are all found. The basic principles can be found in photography to start with. So, and Katie, would you answer the second part about the money part?
Sure. And thanks for that, Carol. Yeah, the smartphone photography is kind of, it's kind of the gateway to everything else. And yeah, and it's just been amazing what we have been able to do with Zoom this last year. So as far as the sales and revenue goes, this winter in January, we opened our online store, and we have already generated, some substantial revenue from our online store. And I would recommend that you check it out, artchangesus.org. And if you go to the gallery and store and look at the images, they're all for sale. They're priced. You place an order online. It's all e-commerce. And order yourself some photos for your home office wall, and also just check out the kids' work because it is really great. So the store has been a significant motivation for the kids, particularly during this time, that they realize, wow, my stuff is up there for sale and I've made some money. They make commissions from selling their work. So all of that is very exciting. And then, the really big deal for us is commissions and getting work with the local community and doing creative projects and operating kind of as a creative services agency, and getting projects that are revenue-based, and we assign the kids, put them into teams, and produce what the client wants. So that really is the next big phase of our work, is developing that outreach and that ability to reach into our community. Bill, you want to say anything more about that? My husband, Bill Skull, is Carol's creative partner in photography, but Bill is also quite a substantially accomplished business person as well. So anything you want to say about that?
Well, sure. I mean, as both Carol and Katie have said, I mean, a key part of the Art Changes model is having revenue, having engagement with the community, not only because it generates revenue for us and for the students, but it also gives them an opportunity to see what the real world is like, right? I mean, they are working to provide services to clients. And maybe those organizations are ones that give them internships while they're in college and hire them after college. And so that's the super critical part of our model. And so if you have projects, your business needs a new website, it needs images for your website, you want to do a facelift so that it feels fresher or more youthful. If you've got an event that you want photography done for, back when we start getting to do events again. Or, you know, if you want a logo designed or even your website redone. So those are all things that our artists can do and we would love to do for you. So reach out if you have projects like that. You know, even if you're a real estate firm, for example, and you want pictures of your commercial building taken or commercial of your pictures of your residential offerings taken, our artists can do that.
I would just add to what you've heard about Art Changes Us that the model we are working off of suggests that Art Changes Us, like a number of these other initiatives, could be self-sustaining at some point between a combination of these sales and commissions and direct gifts to that work from not only church members, but from people in the community or organizations in the community that have a passion about art and want to support young artists in our community. So the church is seeding this ministry, this initiative, but we, our long-term vision is that it could be at least a break-even ministry for the congregation.
And just to add to that, Kathy, thank you for that. Yes, we will rely on donations and generosity of people that are interested in youth development and the arts. But there's also a fair amount of grant money out there for youth development, particularly focused on the arts. And that is, that's funding that we hope to access in the future, just like Hope's Corner has tapped into community funding that is focused on serving people in need.
Thank you. Denise, a couple questions for you. One is the budget, that is Denise and Alan actually, is the budget going to be posted somewhere where people can see it, number one? And number two, is there going to be any more specific campaign to address this year's shortfall and ask people to make up for that deficit? And I can help with that one if you need me to. Denise, you are talking and we cannot hear you.
Sorry. That's with respect to the budget has not been posted historically. Usually the opportunity to hear about the budget and where we are relative to the budget is in the finance committee meetings and the church council meetings. You know, this is the first, well, I guess, you know, I don't know. Well, we could post the budget. I think my only concern would be that it is hard to understand, and posting it without some context we need to do a little thought on that. Alan, you have anything to add?
You know, I was thinking what we might be able to do is take an extract of some of the slide presentations we use at finance or church council, and somewhere maybe post that somewhere on our website and make it available to our members.
I'll just add to that. Part of why we don't post the church budget is because most people aren't interested in that level of granular information, right? Even members of the church, right? It's like too much information for lots of people. But if you are particularly interested in it, if you want to see it, it's not a secret. Don't hesitate to ask, right? Send an email to Denise and she will share that information with you.
And I would encourage anyone that's interested to, once a quarter, we have a church council meeting, and those meetings are open to all. So, and there is a review of our financials at every church council meeting. And we do get in, as Pastor Kathy just said, we do get into more granular detail during the meeting. But if you have a particular interest, there are 4 times a year that you will be able to log on and see that data, even if we don't have it posted somewhere publicly.
And we will be reviewing the upcoming budget for fiscal year 22 in the June church council meeting. It will be approved in that meeting. So that's a good opportunity to really learn about the budget.
Is the finance committee meeting still open for people to sit in and listen?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think it's open for any member of the church if they so desire.
I would recommend attending one because it's really interesting and you get an idea on how much thought goes into just coming up with a budget.
Let me just add, we've got a lot of questions here and we're not going to have time to answer all of them, I'm sure. I want to just say a couple things before I turn this back over to Ken. First, about the current deficit. We are just beginning to see people respond to the information you've gotten over the last handful of weeks about the shortfall for this year. So it's a little bit early to say whether people have responded. We hope they will. And as we've said, we can cover this year's deficit. Where we really want to see and are looking for what you're telling us, meaning the whole congregation, is in the commitments for the following year. So we're not going to have a campaign to meet this year's deficit. We're going to talk about what we want to do as a church going forward. And that's what the Building Again Stronger Than Ever commitment campaign is about. So I hope you'll talk to us in the way you make your commitment for the next year. A couple questions you asked about Changemaker Fellowship, and Kim just put one in. There will be some sort of opportunity for more change makers to be developed among our congregation this fall. We're looking at different ways of doing that. Someone asked whether the Lilly grant imposes some restrictions on our operations. There was a very detailed budget in our proposal to the Lilly Endowment that led to that grant. So Kim Jones and the rest of the Changemaker leadership team have a very specific process that has been approved by the Lilly Endowment, and they're following for these 5 years. There are no other restrictions on the church as a whole that go with that grant. Ken, we're back to you.
Great. So we're at the end of our time for today. Again, we would all like to thank everyone that has taken the time and shown the interest level to attend. Hopefully you've had a chance to gain a much better understanding of sort of what our strategic plan is and all of the various initiatives that are rolling out from that plan. I would encourage each and every one of you, if you have questions after today, let us know. Email us or text us or stop us somewhere if you can find us, and make sure that you get your questions answered. We want you to be fully understanding what we're intending to try to do, because I think only when that happens are we going to be able to move forward and move forward in a very, very meaningful way. So with that, I will thank you again for all attending, and we will see you all hopefully at in-person worship in the very near future. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.